One, I think you're absolutely right. The ego doesn't go away. I think I saw once there was this book called Kill the Ego, and I'm like, oh, I got to buy that, right? I want my ego to go away. No, the ego's always going to be there, right? And in some ways, for me, it's gotten to a point where rather than it's this terrible thing that I want to suppress, it's just like the little kid in me, right? It's this, it's this immature little thing in me that pops up every once in a while. And the quicker I recognize it and am aware of it and sort of love on it, the more it goes away and it allows me to get back to my, level 4 self. So yeah, what I've learned over the years is to simply embrace it, right? To laugh at it, almost like, oh, there it is again, right? There's that thought. And it's funny that it's still there, right? Obviously, it's something to work on. And then I think the other thing is once you talked about wanting to go out and explore new things, and there seems to be this, and I think it happens over and over and over, where when you are less tied to the ego, you want to go out and explore new things. You almost invite them in because you're curious about them and you're like, I wonder, right? There is something to be learned here that one, there is interest about it, and two, I feel like if I go through that door, it's a chance to connect with other people, other things. Maybe I can learn something, I can share it.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Fourth Level Conversations with Stacey and Al. And we are so excited. We've started to bring some amazing guests into our podcast. And just like our previous guest, Dave Williams, I feel like, Al, we are just being blessed with the kind of people that we can learn from. And really the pleasure for us is we get to share these people with the world. And today is no different. This is an individual, Tom Kimball, who I've known, I think, for at least 25 years. Al may have known you longer, Tom. But when we think about a person of integrity and character and wisdom and love to the world and goodness, boy, you're right there, Tom. And we're so grateful for you to join us today. So I'm going to shut up and let us start hearing from you. But I know Al will want to say a thing or two before we go. So thanks for being with us, Tom.
Of course. Thank you.
I've known of Tom for decades, but was blessed to begin supporting Tom in our relationship. I'm thinking it was probably 15 years ago, or so. I don't know when it was. And then he went away for a while, and then he came back, and we've always had this real connection. But whenever I'm with Tom, honest to God, I feel like the final scene of Shawshank Redemption, where I'm Morgan Freeman walking on the beach, and Tom is Tim Robbins scraping the barnacles off a boat, because Tom's, a man of many passions, interests, and qualities. One of which is he's always had a heart for the underdog, and he's always had a fascination with Costa Rica. And I see him on that beach, and whether he ever ends up with that small motel on the beach in Costa Rica or not, in effect, his life is sort of like that. He's the Tim Robbins in the Shawshank prison of life that we're in, because he always represents this higher order of trusting tomorrow and dreaming big and having great heart and empathy. So I look forward to, he thinks our relationship is that I'm his coach, but frankly, I feel like I'm cheating him by charging him money, because I always learn so much from him when we get together. So, Brother Tom, I'm going to start you off in the way that we did with Dave previously, which is I like to ask people for them to share with the audience the story of their life that they've always told themselves, because it tends to be very rich with sort of how people evolve from the innocence of childhood and go through the wars and scars of adulthood and what they learn along the way. And you've done so much with your particular life and gifts. So why don't we use that as a framework for our conversation? And if we get all the way through your life, great, but knowing the three of us, we'll probably have some sidetracks. So you start where you want to start in helping people come to know the majestic movie of your life?
I love it. Well, first of all, such an honor, such a cool thing to be a part of. I love both of you so much. I love what you bring to the world, that you are doing this. You know what, I find myself listening to a lot of podcasts just to consume knowledge, as we all do, and I love that you are kind of just going straight into, frankly, what are the most important things out there, which is authenticity and humanity and what we all struggle with every day. So I promised myself that I would be as authentic as possible with you, and yeah, let's do that. I would say this. Let's start with this. This is sort of a fun story. So uh, I was talking to this. We were going to this doctor. My wife has had some medical issues, and we've been going to this guy who is like he's way out there, and he helps cure people through diets and different stuff. And as we may or may not get to, I'm always attracted to like off the beaten path. So anybody that is unique or brings something different to the table, I immediately go towards them. So Nancy's seeing this guy. He's like holding like elements up to her and saying, nope, your body rejects that. And she's like, whatever, like this. We started calling him the witch doctor, but I loved him. And so I said, hey, listen, I feel fine, but I mean, I'd love to just come and visit with you and get a sense of what you think. And because I've never explored this side of myself. I've looked at myself from all different ways in my life, but I've never done it through the lens of like nutrition and like energy and all this stuff. And he's like, okay, yeah, come in, we'll do this. So I fill out this large questionnaire and I go in and I visit with them, and we already have a rapport at this point. Nancy has since kicked him to the. Nancy's like, I'm not going to him anymore. It's too weird. This guy is like, I just can't have another glass jar with carbon or some other thing held to my forehead and he tell me that my body is rejecting it. And I'm like, well, he can do that to me all day long because I'm digging it. So we sit down. I've answered all these questions. He goes, well, Tom, he goes, your problem started at inception. Now that's kind of interesting, right? Yeah, Stacey. When you hear that, you're like, uh-oh, what did you find? Like some extra chromosome or something? Like I've got like 6 days left on this earth, and he's like, no, you were adopted. So when you asked me, Al, kind of where it all began and what my story is and how I tie myself back to that, at a very, very early age, I was adopted, and like at day one, and I had wonderful parents, and I thought that my life was great. And this guy told me, he's like, well, when you're adopted, imagine being like in the womb and being with this source that, I mean, from the moment you're one cell, you grow and you grow into all these cells, and you've always got this presence around you. And then one day, quickly, it's gone. There's nothing. There's no connection with it whatsoever. He's like, you may have told yourself all these years that it didn't make a difference in your life, but I'm here to tell you it's made a massive difference. And he said, and I went on to quickly, he said, well, but I love my parents, and they raised me so wonderfully, and they told me from the beginning that I'm adopted, and I've since found my birth parents, both my birth mom and birth dad, and it's all great. And he just said, you got some work to do, right? I mean, you being pulled away from that energy source. So anyway, some really interesting stuff there. I told you I'd be authentic, and we jump right into it. And so anyway, I grew up. Fortunately, I was adopted by wonderful parents. My dad was a cardiologist. I lived in Denver. I lived in a really nice neighborhood. We were a member of a club. I had all these things around me, but my mom and dad were very, very involved in the community. And even though I was clearly born with a silver spoon in my mouth, they reminded me all the time that it's not about that. It's about being a good steward. It's about volunteering. It's about doing right by people. And so I had wonderful, wonderful role models around me at all times. But I think as I've gotten older, like into my 20s, I traveled a little bit around the world. I graduated from college and I went down to Costa Rica. Al, you brought that up, and we'll kind of get into the various parts of that. But the first time that I thought I had been to Costa Rica was when I was 18. And I see this amazing place, and I'm like, I want more of this. I want to go back. So when I graduated from college, I went back down there. And I think that is, you're at this age of like 23, 24. I began to see the world for what it was, right? I had had this amazing lifetime, and every once in a while, my mom would take us and we would volunteer and we would be around people that were less fortunate. But when I was down there, I saw it all the time. And I initially developed a sense of I am not worthy of this world, right? Like, why did I get born into this amazing lifetime? I'm not. Um, it how's the best way to put it? I just didn't think I was worthy of it. It threw me into tons of therapy. I got depressed about it, right? I just didn't feel like I should have been given all these gifts when there was so much suffering and so much misery in the world. And fortunately, through that, so Al, all the nice things that you said about me, as far as you know, who I am and what I've become. I wasn't always that person. It was down there buried within. And when all of a sudden my eyes got open to the world, it came at me so heavy and so fast that I didn't know what to do with it. And I would call those the dark years of my life. I mean, I remember having suicidal thoughts. Like, I don't even, the noise of life is uh, so around me all the time, and I can't figure it out. And here I am having immense success in my job, building great relationships with people, but it was a voice louder than all of that. And I finally got through that. I met you, on sort of, it was after a lot of that therapy. I remember one time this guy said to me, he said, Tom, you've been seeing me for how long? I was like, I don't know, Jeff, 18 months. And he said, could you just go home and try this on? Could you just tell yourself that you're a good guy and just be okay with that? Just say, you know what? Don't feel like you have to bear the world's problems all on your shoulders. Just say, you know what? You're just a good guy, Tom, and tell yourself that over and over. And it just opened up this. It was like being reborn. Um, it allowed me to all of a sudden not feel like I had to burden all of the world's problems, that I could just be me. Um, and so what was so cool about that is all of a sudden I felt like like, imagine somebody carrying around 1,000 pounds of weight, and all of a sudden you take that off. I'm sure a lot of people listening have been in that place. If you haven't, I will tell you it's a wonderful feeling. But then also what happens is you begin to feel really good about yourself. And all of a sudden the ego that has been completely suppressed for so long because you've been telling yourself you're not good enough, all of a sudden springs to life. And so it was this really interesting dynamic of first, no ego, trying to do everything for everybody because you felt like you owed it to the world. Then all of a sudden, I don't need to be that person, still be a good person, but you're not doing the world any good by just being sulking around all the time. And then all of a sudden the ego starts to find itself. So anyway, long story short, and we'll bounce around a little bit. We talked about this. It's been a wonderful, amazing journey, and it still is to this very moment of weighing uh, the level four, as you call it, the person that I've discovered within me, which is God's fingerprint on me, and the human condition, the human side, which is pulls us in all these situations, gets us into trouble. It's just wonderful, and I absolutely freaking, I don't know if we're allowed to cuss on this. I won't. I do when I get excited. I
It
love
doesn't.
that we are. Yeah, I won't. We don't want to edit that out. It's so fun to explore it, right? I mean, you guys deal with this all the time. I mean, I guess I would just ask you, because I think that yin and that yang, that level three, that level four, how you find yourself in that. I mean, Stacey, I'll ask you this question. I get to experience this with Al. Al will find himself in level three, and I don't know if for the listeners, Al, you want to give a quick summary of that, but you'll find yourself in that place very quickly. You recognize it and you snap out of it. I'm not there yet. Stacey, I would imagine you're very far along where you recognize it right away. But I mean, that is like, if there's anything that I would want to learn through this, and I'm continuing to figure out, is how to be that person up here, right? Because you make the world a better place. You make the people around you a better place.
What is that, Tom? If for people who haven't ever tuned into this podcast before, and given this wonderful setup you gave as to the extremes that we can go through in our head about our worth and who we are, how would you explain what level 3 and level 4 is, and how you became aware of it, and how you have applied it to a more fulfilling and effective relationship with your life that maybe quiets some of the oscillation between these extreme light and extreme dark states. What is level 3 and 4 in your experience?
Brother, you're so good. I would say this. I would say that in level 3, it's all about me, right? Everything is seen through my lens. Everything is my experience. Everything is what I'm going through. Even if I'm at the very best of my level 3, I'm the best salesperson. I'm killing it. I'm the best friend to everybody, but everything is just reflected through me. And my self worth is really based on how well Tom Kimball, is doing. Um, Level 4, what I've come to experience is you as the droplet of Tom Kimball just blends into the ocean of everything, right? Every living being, every living soul, everything is just part of that substance, and you are just simply a part of it, and you're able to see it from that perspective. And um, frankly, it's amazing because it changes. Man, it's like let me think of an experience. Uh, Gosh, I mean, I don't even know. I was going to say, it's kind of like maybe, I don't know why I'm thinking of this, but your earbuds, when you have it on silent mode and all you can hear is almost like the own sound of your own ears, and then you take it off of it and you hear the symphony of the whole world. Imagine doing that with all of your senses. Um, it's hard to do. Frankly, it's not hard to do. It can be overwhelming, and sometimes. Um, I don't know. I fall back into level 3. Al, sometimes I don't trust myself. I probably fall back into that old mindset of, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve to see the world so beautifully where all of a sudden all the worries and cares of Tom Kimball fall away and I can just simply be and see and interact authentically. My ego just pulls me back into it. So again, I don't know if either of you want to add anything to the level 3 or the level 4, but that's how I experience it.
I'd love to hear what Stacey has to say, but I want to have a follow-up question for you first, Tom. What's an experience in your life where you had a temptation to either proact or react to it as an ego, as a level 3 ego, self-serving, self-focused, all that, but you recognized the option of a level 4 proaction or reaction and chose that level 4? What was one of those situations and what was the impact from it? Because that tends to be the focus of our coaching conversations through the years,
Right.
of remembering the options, right? And then you end up normally choosing the higher road. But what's an example in your life of one that's happened like that? And Stace, I'd love to hear yours after he says that.
Yeah, it's what comes about most easily for me is my interaction with my son. And part of it is because he's such a kind soul and he's young. And even if your child says something like, Dad, you look really old today, it bounces off you. If you hear from your wife, right, or a friend, you're like, F you, da 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 da. So um, there have been just things that have happened where he has made wrong decisions. And I immediately want to jump into, you know what, son, I've been there before. This is what I did. This is what I've learned from it. And instead of immediately jumping into coaching mode or I told you so mode, it is, what was that like? Tell me more, right? There's no me. It's just, I'm curious, right? Curiosity is such a level 4
Yeah.
experience and it's wonderful, right? I mean, I can't say like, I mean, that curiosity of just asking more and understanding why. And what's so cool about it is oftentimes I don't even have to share a lesson with him, Al. He will just talk it through and then he'll come back and say, well, that was pretty stupid, wasn't it, Dad? I'm curious to know why, right? And then you peel back another layer. Um,
Wow, that's
it's so,
beautiful.
but it's so easy with, especially my wife. I mean, we talk about this all the time. My wife is so wonderful, but there are triggers. There are things that she will say that immediately I jump into. I want to prove that I'm smarter, that I know this, and it's really troubling for me. that I can look at one experience with somebody and be so level 4 and on another be so level 3. Because at the end of the day, my purpose in life is to serve others, to be a bright light. And it's really troubling to walk away heated from a conversation with my wife and say, gosh, I screwed that up so bad. Um, I wish it could go back. I know I can, but it's not going to be the same, but I can learn from it. So, yeah.
Well, beautiful example with your son. And what is it that you may choose to or not share with the folks here as to what a dramatically different perspective on your wife is in those moments when your level 3 ego is tempted to see her as somebody to be made wrong, to be judged and whatnot, and wants to fight? What is it that has been co-created out of maybe even some of our conversations about an alternative perspective you can entertain with your wife for people who are married or in significant relationships that maybe has never occurred to them? And if you chose to do it, what was the outcome from it?
Yeah. No, this is great. This is cathartic. It is what we talk about. So just a little background. My wife, starting with breast cancer, which actually turned out to be level 1. So it was ductal. It wasn't even a threat from a cancer standpoint, but it led to some nerve damage, and a lot of pain. It led to a couple of situations where she fell. She really damaged her face. She looks beautiful now. The doctor did a great job, but she has plates and a lot of screws in her face. I know it stinks for her. She had a major blood clot that almost killed her. And during this whole process of on and on and on, this is like 3 years of just ongoing medical stuff, going to doctors together. Um, I I was doing the best I could. I thought, but there were just times where, I mean, it is tough. Anybody that is out there that's been a caregiver before, man, my heart goes out to you. It's so hard to do. And you oftentimes neglect yourself, and then after a while, you recognize that you're neglecting yourself, and then you want more for yourself. And so it was this prolonged 3-year dance, guys, where she just would be like, I would need me time. I didn't even know it was me time, right? Some of the training that we've since had on trauma and how to deal with that is sometimes you just need to call out, time out and say, I just need some, what do we call it? Self-care, right? Where you're just like, hey, I'm too deep, babe. I love you. Can I just get some self-care? And you don't even have to explain it. You just go and take it. I never knew how to call a timeout. I was just powering through this. Well, I started to, she would resent me when I would go to work or I would go play golf, and that was just my way of getting out. And in the meantime, she was stuck in this chair, and she just wanted the lights dark, and she didn't want to do anything. And of course, me, I'm very outgoing, and I'm like, you know what, power through it, let's go. And so I started to resent her for just sitting there and not doing anything, and she started to resent me. So it led to a period of time where there was just a lot of back and forth. Like she would just call me out and be like, you're terrible, you're a terrible husband, and da, 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 and you hear that from the person closest to you, you begin to believe it. So it was a dark time. Now, would I ever want to go back and completely make it go away? Absolutely not, 100%. Would I want to go back and do it differently in some ways? Sure, but I'm getting a chance to do that now. So, Al, now the way I approach it is there are still triggers. And I think it's been very helpful for us to recognize that term trigger. And I see it now. Something will happen, and all of a sudden she will change dramatically. And in some cases, I'm like, oh, it's a trigger. I brought up, money, or I brought up something else, and boom, just it takes her down this road. Other times it doesn't, but I can tell she's done it. And now the way I think is, you know what? Don't don't hold her accountable. Don't think that just because she's a 52-year-old adult that there aren't times where she may behave like a 4-year-old, right? Because she doesn't have the tools. She hasn't processed it and gone through it. Um, Al, you talk about where we all are at different stages on the mountain. And um, I think rather than say she's 52 and she should figure this out, I now say, you know what, this is so hard for her and she hasn't had a chance to process it. She's really low on the mountain. So rather than, pushing her down with my foot, reach down with my hand and try to lift her up.
Beautiful. Stace, what do you think about all this, brother?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many nuggets of wisdom and everything you've talked about, Tom. I'll go back to how you started when you were growing up and you went to Costa Rica and you saw something differently. And I think all of us, I haven't met anybody in life that goes through a certain, maybe that number of decades thinking there's something that they really aren't.
Right.
And you got the gift of that awakening, right? Now, as humble as you are, I can see how it would have been easy for you to go and say, whoa, I'm not worthy, all those things. And so sometimes we think about setting the ego aside, that's the most healthy thing we can do. And I think more importantly might be the recognition of it. Because if we set it aside completely, then we get to do and it's still the ego talking, believe it or not, that says you're not worth it. Right. You're not good enough. You're not a good guy.
Yep.
And the reality is that's still the ego. And what happens to us when we start to recognize that, and you just mentioned triggers, I think of triggers as just metacognition. You're now aware of something. You've become awakened to that particular thing. And so when I was thinking about your description of those things and so forth, and in the industry we've all been a part of, going out and presenting and selling and influencing people has been such a key part of developing business and success. And I've always shared with people, there's a difference between being confident and being egotistical. And I'm not sure I've quite figured it out yet to make sure that when we're being confident that there's no ego attached to it. But I think the reality is the confidence that I'm now looking for is a true recognition of the gift that we are inside of the world. And at level 4 thinking, just as you said, we're just part of the bigger world and universe. We're an important part of it. We don't lose our uniqueness, but we're part of something grander than ourselves. So when I think about all the things you are describing, Tom, I'm like, I'm sitting here applauding, celebrating the struggle you've had because you've become awakened. And I know that's kind of a funny term for people to use. I certainly think in my circles over the course of my life, people would think that as odd. Now I think I'm looking for opportunities every day to awaken.
Right.
Because to me, it's cognition, it's metacognition, it's soul living, it's feeling, it's living life with abundance, the good and the bad. And I mean, I can tell you all kinds of stories about level 3 behavior versus level 4 in crisis in my life, from how I handled a divorce to how I went from a career with one company for 24 years to another. And, you can have these feelings of, man, it didn't turn out the way I wanted it to. And shame on somebody else for that, which couldn't have been me. Right.
Right.
And
yeah.
now it's not that. It's, oh, I'm so grateful for this change in my life, because now I can appreciate everything that was so awesome going through that.
Yeah.
And what was so awesome in those relationships. And certainly with that comes some degree of wisdom. And with wisdom, I think, comes the potential for less suffering and greater sense of peace and value and all those things.
Yeah.
And so I'm loving hearing your story, and I'm like, yeah, I relate to all of that.
Oh, brother, I love how we're unpacking this.
Yeah.
So two things that you just said right now that energize me. One, I think you're absolutely right. The ego doesn't go away. I think I saw once there was this book called Kill the Ego, and I'm like, oh, I gotta buy that, right? I want my ego to go away. No, the ego's always going to be there, right? And in some ways, for me, it's gotten to a point where rather than it's this terrible thing that I want to suppress, it's just like the little kid in me, right? It's this, it's this immature little thing in me that pops up every once in a while. And the quicker I recognize it and am aware of it and sort of love on it, the more it goes away, and it allows me to get back to my, level 4 self. So yeah, what I've learned over the years is to simply embrace it, right? To laugh at it, almost like, oh, there it is again, right? There's that thought. And it's funny that it's still there, right? Obviously, it's something to work on. And then I think the other thing is once you talked about wanting to go out and explore new things, and there seems to be this, and I think it happens over and over and over, where when you are less tied to the ego, you want to go out and explore new things. You almost invite them in because you're curious about them and you're like, huh, I wonder, right? There is something to be learned here that one, there is interest about it, and two, I feel like if I go through that door, it's a chance to connect with other people, other things. Maybe I can learn something. I can share it. Um, has anyone ever showed you their lunch on a podcast?
Their
Fire
lunch.
first. I'm going to show it to you, everybody. Ready for this? I know this may hit the editing floor, but I'm showing it to you for a reason. So this right here is it's chicken with rice with this Indian lentil beans. And here's why I'm showing it to you is my son, God bless him, he's 16 and he wants to get in better shape. And all of a sudden, like all of his buddies are like cooking their own meals, right? Like perfect carbs, like low fat. So he goes out and gets all this healthy chicken, like probably like 6 pounds of it, and he cooks it all up. And I talked to my wife that night. I'm like, how'd it go? She's like, oh man, he's so upset. He's so upset. He cooked the chicken and he doesn't think he cooked it enough because he said he bit it and he chewed on it. It was pink. And so it's all out in the fridge. He packaged it all up, but he won't touch it now. And he's so upset. He put his heart and soul into it. And so I go out and look at it. My wife's like, well, you got to just throw it away. I don't want to touch it. She's freaked out. She doesn't eat meat. And I'm like, okay, I'll go look at it. Well, of course, curious me, I start pulling it apart and I'm like, this doesn't look too bad. So my wife's like, you're going to get salmonella. I'm like, you know what? I've never had it before. This chicken looks pretty good to me. I don't see any pink in there. So what the heck? Let's eat it. If it happens, we deal with the consequences. But somewhere in here, there's a lesson to be learned. And so I don't know. I find as life goes on more, I am looking more for those little opportunities. Oftentimes they're silly. Oftentimes they're very serious. But it's great to just want to go through that door that I haven't gone through anymore. You
Well,
know,
it's so interesting you talk about the ego, and I think most neuroscientists would tell us you can't eliminate the ego, but
right?
what we talk about is just quieting it,
Yeah,
quieting
yeah.
it. And so I'm not sure I want to challenge people to try some uncooked chicken to
Why
see
not?
how karma is working in their life.
It, I think it was. Let me just say it was right on the edge, Stacey. So it's one of those. It was not raw. If it had been fully pink, yeah. So I'm glad we're going through that. But yeah, anyway, anyway, keep going. Just
I got a question for Tom, Al. Is you've gone through this experience over the last few decades of your growth and maturity and understanding of the world and life. How do you transfer that into your business efforts and your business relationships, where there is inevitably, as we all know, massive egos driving activities and relationships on a daily basis?
um, I go back to the old adage that was shared with me very early on, and it took me a long time to listen to it. Is you have two ears for a reason, right? I start with just listening, and I find that at the end of the day, Al says to me all the time, Tom, I'm not teaching you anything. I'm just a dust-free mirror, right? I am here to get you to share out loud what is in you, right? The symphony that you have within you, and I just want you in a very safe environment to get it out and hear it and see what you think. See if you like what you hear. And so I find that in interactions where there is ego, where there is pressure from the company to go out and get that business, and people, want you to show up and hey, what do you got? And I'm in an industry which people don't tend to respect what we have because it's a commodity, right? And there's a lot of people out there that work in commodity industries. I say to people all the time, if I'm talking about what I sell or do for a living, I'm doing the wrong thing. So I will ask a lot of questions. My preparation, Stacey, now is understanding the audience, getting my arms around what I think would be of value to them. So doing my homework, having the respect for their time in advance to go in prepared, and then simply ask those questions. And depending on where it goes, ask more. And then I know when it's time when they put me on the spot and say, hey, you've asked all these questions. What do you have for us? I'm in a really good position there to say very clearly, probably in a few succinct sentences, here's what I've got. Either it doesn't make sense, or if I'm hearing you right, this is what I think we can do. Is that important to you? So yeah, it's really wonderful to be in that place to allow people to tell their stories. And I don't know why. I don't know. It's one of those things where I think it's a lesson learned. You have to learn it the hard way. So if there's anybody out there listening who is new in sales, um, your mind and your ego is going to tell you you need to show up. You need to show them who's boss. You need to show them you're a pro. You need to show them you know what you're doing. Um, I would question that. Try asking some really thoughtful questions and then just quiet yourself, and they will tell you when it's time to speak. And I think you'll be impressed at how things go.
I really appreciate you sharing that. I was at a conference last week, a sales conference for the industry, and there was a common theme that went through it I thought was beautiful. And it says, solve, don't sell.
Yeah,
Solve, don't sell. You can't solve if you don't listen, right?
totally.
And I think that what we need to help the next generation of leaders in any industry, whether it's the mortgage or title or any other industry, is be in authentic relationships, not transactional.
Yeah.
And if you go in and you're going to try to win the account, you go in there and you're going to try to influence their thinking about what you have to offer, whether they need it or not, it's not going to work. But if you can be authentic and go in there with their best interest in mind, care more about their success than they do, you'll have good things happen, as you have in your whole career. I've watched you do it.
Yeah, thank you. And I mean, we know we learn over time. We watch each other. We have great conversations. Um, what came to my mind is simply this: is if we ourselves are quiet and watch other people do it, sometimes we learn. We're like, oh my gosh, that's so effective. Going through so many different medical meetings and procedures with Nancy, the medical industry does this beautifully. You don't show up and they don't just run something over your head and say, "Okay, let me tell you what's wrong with you." They ask so many questions, right? And from different angles and different scenarios, and you really feel like you're having a chance to be heard. And as a result of that, they're not doing it to try to get you to buy medicine from them or whatnot. They're doing it because they are trained professionals and they know that if they listen well enough, they are going to solve. They're not there to sell anything. So, yeah, it's a good reminder for me to just you know just pay attention and watch it unveil itself in life because it does all over the place.
Well, Tom, over the last segment here, I think you have an opportunity that we want to afford you. First of all, here's some things I'd be interested in having you share with everyone. Your personal life vision and what the values are within it and how you have applied it in life and why it's mattered. And if we assume that nobody is promised tomorrow and the three of us are blessed to have this moment where we get a chance to gather spiritual bread together, intellectual bread together, and kind of share a meal of the soul. If you had three things that you were to share with whoever is listening as the highest wisdoms that you've gained in your journey, those would be two things I think could be very compelling for people to hear: what your personalized vision is and how you've applied it, and when you do, what happens. And what are the three wisdoms that, if today were your last day, you would want people to know that you've learned on this sacred journey of your life that you've been on?
So Al, it's interesting. You asked the same question of Dave Williams, and he said it without even blinking. Um, I hate to say this, the personal life vision. I want it. I would love to have it. Right. I'm trying to put together the semblance of what it was because I said it so many times over and over and over. I think that was in our first iteration of our coaching like 20 years ago. Um, I don't. You probably don't have it or access to it, because what I was thinking is I would love so much to hear it and see how true it rings today. And I don't want to pause the flow of this to look it up because I'm sure I have it in my phone.
Well,
Uh,
and do you have your workbook still from 20 years ago?
yeah, I have my workbook at home from 20 years ago.
It'd be in
Absolutely.
there.
I have
You can
all.
look at it tonight. Now you get to come back to the podcast a second time.
Yeah, I love it.
So let's do this. Let's take the cheat sheet approach to personalized vision and say, Tom, today's your last day on the planet, and you want to be remembered for having given other people the experience of 3 values as your legacy of having mattered that you were here. What would those 3 values be?
Yeah. And when I think of the words in my personal life vision, I know that highest potential was in there. I know that love was in there. And I want to say like, curiously pursue. So I would start by saying I I would hope that everybody would have the courage to recognize or to try to dig within them and find out their to find that unique source of energy that every single person has. Everybody is born with it, and bring it about because when we talk about finding your highest potential, that can be so intimidating. It's like, oh, what did your parents tell you they wanted you to be, right? And so if I'm saying, oh, my dad was a doctor, the fact that I'm not a cardiologist is even better than him, and he wanted me to be one at some point, that's not it at all. It's not what other people are telling you. It's simply getting in touch with that clarity of who you are and what your true passion is, and then allowing that to manifest itself over time. So I would say that the best thing that we can do for the world, and the world needs help. It's always need help, right? We're in a tough spot right now, but you can always find a way that things are in a tough place. But getting yourself very, very much connected to who you are and that level 4, and then just simply being that person unapologetically. Um, again, like right now, I'm like, I can't believe I showed my lunch on a podcast. Like my ego is sitting here saying, why did you do that? But it's like, you know what? It just was there, right? I mean, that's just who I am. There was just something that said, is Stacey, as you were talking about the ego, and exploring new things, you do it. So yeah, I would say that if humankind and every being was able to tap into and move towards their highest potential without any expectation of what that means to anybody else, it's simply your own symphony, your own song. Do that because it will make this place beautiful and amazing. Um, Two, I would say find quiet places. And this is from a guy who, both of you all know this. Like when you see me in a room, there's got to be chatter, there's got to be noise. I got to be talking to people. There's got to be, I mean, that human connection is so critical. But what I've learned over the years is to find more and more time to be by myself, to walk in nature, to write, to journal. Um, Anybody who has lived on this earth one lifetime. I tend to be of the belief system that, the soul keeps coming back and keeps picking things up until it's ready to go wherever it goes. And so I feel like just personally, I've been in other lifetimes before, and there's so much internal that I see and that I want to process, and so just to be quiet with myself and to spend time allows me to recharge, allows me to put thoughts together, and it's wonderful, right? So I don't know. I mean, if I were talking to, and again, people are going to hear that. I'm not terribly concerned what people think, frankly. But I just find that when I share with other people and say, are you finding time to get quiet with yourself, really authentically quiet with yourself? What are you finding, and how are you experiencing that? And you guys are both nodding your heads. So before I share my third one, what do you all think about getting quiet, and what does that mean to you, and how do you do it, and what benefits come from it?
Stace?
Tom, it's the daily routine of my life to start the day. It would be impossible for me to start a day without that quiet.
Yeah.
And it's in the form of reading and learning. It's in the form of meditation. For me, it's in the form of prayer. And for me, it's in the form of thinking about circumstances and things that happen. So I think that's, I'm actually reading a book right now about how to listen to God. I actually think that's the time I try to listen to God.
Yeah.
And I think it starts the day for me just to ground me. And now, whatever might come along that day, it's I'm prepared for it because I'm already calm. I think calming our mind, that's been the biggest challenge of my lifetime, Tom, is calming my mind. I think for me, I think it's true for mankind, but for me, the biggest battle in my life, right up here.
Yeah.
And there are times where I feel like I'm gaining, and other times I'm like, wow, I got a long ways to go. I think that's the human experience, right?
Yeah.
But that quiet time, I don't think you could ever have metacognition triggers that you start to recognize. Learning about the difference between level 3 ego identity and soul identity level 4. I don't think you could do that if you don't get some quiet time.
Right.
So that might be one of the greatest pieces of advice that any of us could give to somebody. So thank you for bringing it.
Yeah. Beautiful.
How about you?
Takes me back about 50 years when I was studying for the Zen monastery and doing 12-hour meditations on Sundays. 55 minutes sitting still in silence and 5 minutes walking to have the blood move around, which sounds torturous to most people, but was easily the most blissful experiences of my life, beyond sex, beyond anything you could imagine. Because what I realized experientially in those moments, and have since in moments of meditation and quieting the mind, is that the source of our distrust of life is our thoughts. And if you can learn how to get beneath the thoughts, you can escape into a place where you aren't afraid, you don't have any pain, you don't have any angst, you don't have any worries, but you're still extremely aware because you're not cluttering up your consciousness with thought bubbles. So quiet time is an environmental invitation into internal quiescence. So when I find myself at moments where I'm in a dark state or an imbalanced state mentally, I simply say to myself, thoughts. And it reminds me that that isn't a reality, other than it seems like a reality because my cognitive mind is thinking thoughts that's trying to convince me that it's reality. And if we can get beneath the thoughts, we get to the bedrock of our consciousness, where the thoughts haven't had yet time to sculpt the artificial reality that the ego relies on for its continuance. So quiet time is the essence of spiritual connection to me.
Yeah.
So, Tom, Al's always been an overachiever. I've never meditated for 12 hours, but I wish I could figure out how to do that. I'd have to
pretty amazing.
That, but I have no doubt that he's capable of doing that even today. The thing that I think maybe sometimes there's some practical lessons we want to give people. And if anybody's listening and in the morning, the first thing you do is open your email, my opinion is you're doing yourself and probably your family and your company a great disservice. If the next thing you do is start scrolling through Facebook and other things, you're doing yourself and your family and your company a disservice. Get yourself right first. There's time for those things, and you'll find yourself more productive when you've got that energy force starting the day, ready to go, not encumbered by anxiety and fear and worry of what those 10 emails you just looked at gave to you. It's crazy. And I did it for years.
it's so true. That reminds me, and I'll just go here real quick. Al and I reconnected, and I reached out to Al because I needed to spend time with Al, and there I was just you get to this place where you feel like you're burdened, and you're not the best version of yourself, and you're not acting as your highest potential. And after about 3 or 4 coaching calls, he said, "Tom, can we just talk? Like, this isn't who I normally experience you as, with all all due respect." He's like, "Tell me about some of your routines." And he asked about my mornings, and I said, I get up, and kind of to wake up, I got, I start going through email, and the first thing waiting for me is a news feed, and it's the top 5 stories of the day. And we talked about, and he said, "Well, are those stories positive or negative?" I said, "Okay, Al, I see where you're going here." He goes, "No, no, no, let's really unpack this." And it led to this conversation about white pearls versus black pearls.
Mhm.
And he talked about, have you guys
Tell him. That's a
yeah,
great.
It's
it's
a
so
great
good. And my bag, Al, is my bag of white pearls that I carry around with me to this day and give out to people, which I'll talk about that in a second, is in my office, where I'm in a closing room right now. But the idea is this: is the way a pearl starts is a grain of sand finds its way into an oyster. The oyster feels it, and it's kind of poking it, and so it has this secretion, and it coats it a little bit to keep it from getting poked. And but it still recognizes that it's got something that's not it from the outside, and so it continues to coat it and coat it and coat it and coat it. Eventually, it gets big enough, and it spits it out because it's so big, and that's what a pearl is. And Al shared that there's pearls of all different colors. And he said, just for the purposes of this conversation, Tom, you may have added a lot of dark colors, coatings to you, and that's what's burdening you down. And he said, why don't you try getting away from that, and really anything else that you find is negative, and just make a conscious effort to coat yourself with white, the white coatings over and over and over. If there's a book you're reading that starts going down a really dark path, and you realize, I don't this it's not steering out of this path. This is what the book's going to be about, and it's taking you down that path, ditch it. Same with movies, same with relationships. If it's not one that is meaningful and matters to you, and if it is, and I've done this sometimes with Nancy, I've just said, honey, I just can't be in this conversation right now. I love you very much, but let's reset when our energy levels are different. And it has made such a difference just to keep that concept of every single, you know, interaction I'm dealing with. I am looking for that, pearl white coating. And just
And
it's
what are you doing with the pearls to help others do that, Tom? That's the magic here.
Yeah, yeah. So Al encouraged me. This is so funny. Al encouraged me. He's like, "Well, what if you just got some like little white pearls and gave them to people when you had such conversations that you felt like were like a great way to remind them of who they are." And I'll tell you how I got the pearls, and then I'll tell you typically what the interaction looks like between people is. I had to, so I go online and I'm looking for pearls. If you're buying like true nice pearls, I don't know how much they are. I didn't even get there, but they're a lot, a couple thousand a piece. So I had to find these beautiful pearls. Most pearls have holes in them. They're plastic. They're made for necklaces. So I find these pearls from China. They're glass. They're beautiful. It's hard to really tell the difference if you're just looking at them. Anyways, this bag came and there's like 2,000 pearls in there. So Al, I've got my work cut out for me. I'm just starting to make a dent into the bag. But when I am talking to somebody and they allow their true, authentic beings to come out, they are transparent, and I pick up that they have shown me who they are. And it's happened with friends that I know, it's happened with people that I've met for the very first time. And I reach into my pocket and I just say, hey, I want to give this to you. And I'm not going to tell you why I'm giving this to you. I'm just giving it to you. But the one hint I will tell you is I'm giving you a white pearl. I'm not giving you a black pearl. Why don't you sit with that for a while, and I'll either circle back, or if you can't stand it, come, call me back and let's talk about it. And I just leave them with that.
Wow.
And it was interesting. It was what I think is wonderful about that is you're giving them that moment of silence, right? You give somebody a gift, you go into the storytelling of it. Who knows where their mind is? Oh my gosh, I'm special. He gave me a pearl. Maybe he doesn't give these to too many other people, or maybe the story in their head is, oh my gosh, maybe he does this for everybody, right? There's no talk of it. Well, come on, Tom, why are you doing this? No, 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 no. Just sit with it for a bit. We'll talk. We'll circle back later. And it gives me this wonderful. There hasn't been a person that I haven't circled back with or hasn't circled back with me, and we talk about it. And I will say, I got to tell you what, Stacey, the reason I gave you that pearl, that conversation that we had was wonderful. But when you started telling me about when you opened up about your divorce and how you did or didn't handle it so well, maybe both, and what you've learned. One, that was hard. I knew it was. I appreciate so much you just being authentic in that moment. And I want to tell you how meaningful it was for me, how much it meant to me for you to have the trust in me and to show another human being that you could share that. And I learned a lot from it. So if it means something to you, keep this pearl visible and remember to be that person, because when you were that person, you were giving your gift to the world, whether you know it or not.
Wow.
And you know what I love about you bringing up the 2000 pearls? Immediately I had the intuition, okay, that's how long Tom's physical life as Tom will go. He has 2,000 pearls to give away. And emblematic of life itself, he is to be giving them away at every opportunity where he runs across somebody where it will remind them of the option of being a white pearl in their minds and in their lives and in their actions rather than black. But like all of us, he will be spending his precious life like we do every day, but very mindfully and consciously, in recognizing that he's going to choose to parse out his life as an acknowledgement of the light in our life, with a recognition that he dies a little bit with each pearl he gives away, but with the last pearl, he will become infinite.
Al, I love you. I don't always think of it that way, but man, I love how you frame stuff, right? It's so you. But honestly, like right? And not but, and what have we been talking about? What have we been talking about here? Trying to be the best version of yourself. When I've got this little bag of pearls in my pocket and I feel them in there, I know that people are probably not going to be a lot of people, because of just the way life is. They may not share that naturally. And so if I can find a way to be authentic with them and give them a little bit of that, it might elicit it back out, right? And, and that leads me, I know we're getting short on time. That leads me, I'm just going to say this to my third pearl of wisdom, which is finding common ground, right? I think that we live in such a detached world, and I'm so sad in a way to see how much time and energy we lose carrying around, this anchor of, he's a this, she's a that, they believe in this, right? I mean, we're torn so far apart, and yet you can find common ground with anybody. I could find a person out there that has almost zero matches up with me, whether it's my religious belief, my political belief, on and on and on and on and on and on and on. I promise you, if I just set aside anything I knew about them and who I thought I was and just went through some common ground activities, we would find that and we would settle on it. And what you recognize is if you focused on that little piece of turf that you share in common, as opposed to the masses around you that you don't, that's all that matters. You can find love in that place, you can find connection, you can find understanding in that place. And I just think if we all did that a little bit more, made a conscious effort to say, in every interaction that I am in, especially the new ones, I'm going to try to find that common ground, and I'm going to spend some time in that place, because you just create a connection, and there's love, and there's respect, and there's understanding, and it's just a wonderful thing. So I try to teach that to David, right?
That's a very level four. That's a very level four thing you just articulated. Beautifully level four, and it's kind of like when they asked Gandhi if he'd ever seen God, he said, absolutely, in the eyes of everyone I pass on the street.
Yeah.
I try to remember that, particularly with people that I'm sideways with, or I have the temptation to be judgmental over because of those differentiations, my football team, your football team, my political party, all that bullshit.
Yeah.
I try to remember when I see people, particularly people that I'm not feeling a natural connection for, they have a soul within them that is a part of that same ocean that my soul is. And therefore, that's what's love worthy about them. Don't lack in your love for them out of their personality presentation, because God help you if the world judges you as only your personality presentation rather than what's lovable about you. Stacey, bring us home, brother.
Yeah, you two just made beautiful connection about commonality, and here's what I think: if we could just stop trying to prove we're right all the time, we will see the most common part we have with anybody we come in contact with is humanity. We all share fears and worry and hope and joy and sadness and anger. We're all the same if we just quit trying to prove to each other we're right all the time. And then we can embrace each other with unconditional love, unconditional acceptance, no need to judge others. And by doing so, we give that gift to ourselves.
Yeah, beautiful.
It's amazing.
Amen.
Hey, for folks, the brilliant Tom Kimball. Tom, you've honored us. And I don't say that to build your ego. I say it because it's true. And we consider you our brother, a great friend. And I think you're going to have to order more pearls, because I know you'll run through 2,000 people like that. You're such a connector. And so, folks, Al and I, Tom, I know any of us will be happy to chat with you if you're going through something in your life and you'd like to talk about it or have someone listen. We're great at listening. We're great at helping you figure out you. And that would be any motive we'd have if you call us. So please do. Tom, thanks, brother. That was awesome.
Love you guys.
Tom, amazing job. Thank you for joining us and sharing your heart, your wisdom, and your journey with us. And who knows? We may need to have you back, because there was a lot here to still unpack. And one of the other great things that came up out of today that I wasn't expecting is I realized that the next book that Stacey writes, he created the title for today, which I think is very compelling, which is metacognition.
Yes.
That's not a term I hear, and it's a brilliant term. And I think also captures kind of the scope of illumination within which he naturally walks through life. So you guys are a blessing to the world, and I'm honored to be with you today and learn from you once again. Love you, brothers.
Thank you.
Love you guys.
Love
Thanks
you,
for
brother.
watching, everybody. Have a wonderful time. Take care. Thank you.
Thanks.